Hi everyone, this is Prashad Parthiban. Today I am going to talk about workers' compensation and employers' liability policy. Basically, when I talk to people, when they say workers' compensation, they blindly understand that it's one line of business. But within workers' compensation, the policy is divided into three major categories. So it's very important you understand those differences between these three major categories. The first category is workers' compensation, and then the second category is employers' liability. That's the reason why they call workers' compensation and employers' liability policy. And the third category is other states insurance, which we will talk about in detail. So first let's see what do you mean by workers' compensation, what it really covers. It automatically pays the injured worker or their families for medical cost, lost wages or death benefits. Basically, say if you have an employee who got injured in the work location or during their work, then what will happen is the workers' compensation statute will have certain rules. Basically, if that happened in the work location and without proving anybody's fault, they will provide this basic benefits, right? It's all based on the workers' compensation statute laws that are defined for workers' compensation policy. For example, say a factory worker got hurt in his hand while occupying or using a machine, right? Then what happens? The workers' compensation policy will pay hospital bills, like their salary, maybe 80% of their salary or 60% of their salary based on the defined coverage, etc. Right? Generally, what will happen is in workers' compensation, they will not cover like pain or suffering or like punitive damages, meaning if the employer is not going to or employer have not maintained the machines in a safety way, those kind of things will not be covered, right? All that they will cover under workers' compensation is their hospital bills or their part of their salary, etc. That's what we call them as workers' compensation statute. Now, the second part, employer's liability, right? That protects the employer, not the employee, right? It protects the employer if the injured worker or family sues for additional money claiming the negligence, right? Basically, say in the same scenario, right? The factory worker got injured. Now what happens? Because of the fact the pain and suffering is not covered under workers' compensation statute, right? If the family, immediate family of the worker thinks that they have undergone a lot of pain and suffering and it have given them additional cost, then they may file a lawsuit or something like that, right? That time, the employer's liability will come into play. Basically, if the employee says that the employer was at negligence, and they try to file lawsuit and they try to cover or they try to claim cost for even pain and suffering, then the employer's liability will come into play. Basically, workers' compensation will not have any kind of limits, whereas employer's liability will have some limits, like this is a maximum that the insurance company will pay, right? So defense cost or cost for pain and suffering, etc., etc. Now, the third part is important, right? Other state insurance. Basically, the part 1 will have list of states covered, like say New Jersey or New York. Now what will happen is, say if the employee is traveling to a new location, maybe Pennsylvania, then what will happen? The other states insurance section will say all the states will also be covered except monopolistic, meaning in case if the employee is traveling to a new location, that time what will happen is if that particular employee got injured due to their work, then still they will be covered for a temporary period of time. Not like entire year, maybe 30 days or 60 days. This is kind of designed to make sure that accidentally if the employee is traveling for a work related matters to a different state or etc., then this will safeguard them as a temporary way, right? Not extended way. So the company knows that the employee is going to travel to that particular location often, then they need to include that particular state in the main section of the policy. So that are the three differences, right? If you see this example, worker travels to New Jersey, when the covered states are Pennsylvania, California and Florida, then still because New Jersey is there part of the other states insurance, still the employee will be covered. So that's what I wanted to cover today, because people always have this misconception that workers' compensation is one line of business, but within that line of business there are three major categories, right? Workers' compensation, which is going to give coverage based on the workers' compensation statute law, whereas employer's liability will give coverage for extra things like pain, suffering, punitive damages, etc., etc., because of the fact that the workers' compensation statute will not cover those things. and the other state insurance will make sure that if the employee is traveling to a different state which is not covered in the primary state for a temporary period of time, that will make sure that it's taken care. Thank you once again for your continuous support. Have a great day. Bye bye.